Hearing yourself on the phone and listening to people's responses as you get, especially early in sales, you realize how bad you really are.
Yeah.
Having that experience and going through that, you really how to handle objections, how to position the product, and really just be a better listener.
Yeah.
Because before we
had a one-page script, and the new people, I said, listen, if you will just read the script, if you'll just read it and go all the way to the bottom, you'll pass the test. And they just can't do it. They have to spew off in one direction or another. I'm like, you don't need to do any of that.
A lot of people don't know your name in the company. Like no one knew Blackbaud, no one knew some of the other places we worked at. So you had to tell your story.
Yeah.
But you had to do it crisply and pithily and right in the beginning. And it's hard to get that to come across.
Yeah.
All right, John Sterling here. Listen, I help salespeople get started fast. I've got a podcast for you here today called Noob School, where we interview crazy good salespeople, outstanding VPs of sales, and business owners who are all successful and started in sales. We're going to drill back to when they were just getting going. We're going to learn about some of the smart things that they've done to help them crush it, and also some of the things that slowed them down. We're going to publish this podcast every Friday morning so you can get some juicy weekly tidbits. It's going to help make you better and better every week. So we'll help your sales career get launched like a rocket ship. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and believe it or not, TikTok. No dancing, I promise. Maybe some dancing. SalesTrainingForNoobs.com is the website. Enjoy the Noob School.
All right. Well, welcome aboard, Matt.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. So this is how Matt and I got started. So I'm working along, some muckety-muck business guy here in Greenville, and I get this call from this guy I don't know. And he goes, John, this is Matt Klein. You don't know me, but I'm a new professor over at Clemson Business School, and played basketball at College Charleston. I knew played at Citadel. And I'm just trying to meet everyone. I'm a new guy. I'm trying to meet everyone in town that's important around here. When I heard that word, I was like, well, you've come to the right place. And so the old-fashioned cold call. He was literally trying to network with anyone in town who was kind of, I guess, own businesses, I assume. And it was quite easy for me to say yes. And you even suggested a place that was real near where I worked. Right around, what was it?
Right.
It was some kind of Mexican place?
Yeah, right around the corner from you.
Which was very smart.
Convenient.
And he got there early, and he got us a really good spot. So he wasn't just coming in at the last second. So everything about our original meeting, I was impressed by, and subsequent to that as well.
Thank you, John.
So I just think it's a good example for people as a way to meet people. You can still make an old-fashioned cold call, even if that would have been a voicemail, that would have worked.
What you're trying to give people is an experience, and I'll share that a little bit later about why I'm OCD about that type of setup and engagement with folks.
Tell us more about it. Let's jump right into it. Tell us about the process of calling, moving to an area because you weren't from here.
Correct. And
trying to network and meet all the people in the area that are, seem to be legitimate business people.
Yeah. So when I first came to Greenville, like you said, I didn't really know anyone. My brother was from here, but, he had a different network, different crowd.
Yeah.
And, it was my wife that brought us here. She got to be the curator for the Museum of Art.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. But for me, I didn't know anyone. And so being in the software world, I wanted to meet as many folks as possible. And Next was around or starting at that time. Mm-hmm. And, the first thing you want to do is, I'll just rent a space at Next. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. So I worked there a couple of days a week.
Yeah.
And you can meet those folks and get to know those folks. And then
Next is the technology center.
Yep, the nonprofit or the extension of the Greenville Chamber.
Okay.
So they still have a place on Church Street, and I think they still have Next on Main, and they're still doing their thing, and which is great. And so there's a real buzz about Greenville at that time, about 10 years ago with Next. And they had a lot of lunch and learns and, kind of give backs. And I met some great folks like yourself and others, and got involved with Venture South and met a lot of folks there. And that's actually how I found a co-founder for one of my businesses. was through all that networking. But you don't know who you're coming across, so might as well throw a line out.
Yeah.
Make them feel important, as you say,
Right.
and then set the table right. Give them an experience they otherwise couldn't get, or take them to a nice lunch. It's $100 on your side, but what you get out of it is a relationship and a connection that you otherwise wouldn't get just trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And my goal was hopefully to help you, and more importantly, you help me, and everybody wins.
Yeah. I agree. And it's a little thing. It's a small sales thing, but I could tell as the prospect in this situation that you had just taken a little more effort than normal in picking the restaurant and getting the table, and you're probably there 20 minutes early. And that means something. Just as in these days, that someone's trying,
Right.
to do something.
That's right. It wasn't the Poinsett Club, it wasn't one of the country clubs, but you can create that same environment in other places as well.
Yeah. Well, you've learned a lot about sales over the years, and we'll back it up a little bit. I mentioned the basketball. You went to college at Charleston and played on the basketball team. What'd you major in?
Well, I started out in computer science,
Okay.
but I reached my mathematical limit, which is another way of saying failing some classes.
Yeah.
So what do you do in that situation?
Poli-sci?
Well, close.
Okay.
Communication.
Communications, all right.
Get in and get out as quick as possible.
Okay.
4 years up or out. That was the rule.
Yeah.
So I had to make a quick switch.
Yeah.
But I had a great professor because I had an internship at the company you probably mentioned here in a minute, Blackbaud, as a programmer my junior year. Went through that process and enjoyed it, but realized I didn't want to be strapped to a desk staring at a monitor every day.
Yeah.
And my communications professor told me, she said, well, why don't you got that software background, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you go into sales for them and try that approach? And luckily enough for me, they were hiring their first account development reps.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was one of the first 5 they ever brought on.
Wow.
It was a interesting experience in that transition because it was new for them then too. That whole account development, dial for dollars approach.
So this is
Blackbaud.
which became one of the biggest software companies in South Carolina.
That's correct.
Right after DataStream.
That's right. That's good.
But you probably met some of our DataStream people.
Oh,
there.
definitely.
You took a lot of our people.
Yes, we sure did poach quite a bit.
Well, they wanted to move to Charleston, I think.
That's a good setup.
Yeah.
Daniel Allen.
Yeah.
Before Daniel Allen became Daniel Allen.
Yeah. They were Mount Pleasant, I think, back then.
That's right. Well, back then, I was on Folly Beach. I could actually commute from Folly Beach to Daniel Island and make it there in 35 minutes. Now you might call it an hour and 35.
Yeah.
But it was a good world. And, starting right out of undergrad, going into account development, I had to make that choice, right? Because what I planned didn't work out. But the professor gave me a shot, gave me an opportunity.
Yeah.
And it was straight up dial for dollars, and you have to build some resilience doing that.
Right. So they hired their first 5 account development reps, ADRs.
Correct.
What did they have before then?
They had nothing. They had account executives doing outbound calls themselves, generating their own pipelines.
Okay.
And so our role was essentially to build up leads to pass on, once they're qualified, to the account executives, the gray hairs, if you will.
The gray hairs.
That's right. And so we got paid, you'll get a kick out of this, we got paid $500 a lead that was qualified and sold.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Huh.
And then we had I still have my offer letter. It was $30,000 a year and a $2,000 quarterly bonus if you had enough talk time, dials, and hours on the day. On the average. So it was like 2.5 hours of talk time, 110 dials a day, and so many leads generated.
Do you think that's a good comp plan?
No, because you can't predict what's going to sell.
Yeah.
So that's a carrot you can hang out, but I can't control once I pass it to a gray hair whether or not he's going to close it in 6 months, 9 months, or 12.
Yeah.
So don't necessarily think that's necessarily the best approach to a comp plan for an ADR.
So do you think it would be better to pay the inside rep or the ADR on like a combined number with the outside rep?
Yes, but that would probably mean that you're tied to that particular outside rep, working closely together. And we did attempt and tried to do that where you would basically generate leads for maybe 1 or 2 outside reps And I think that's a smart move.
Yeah. So
because then you build a mentor relationship.
Yeah, but you weren't doing that on this. Okay,
No,
that's what I misunderstood, because that's exactly what we did. We had a 1-to-1 inside outside, and the only way it ever worked was just to say, it's one number now, you two. One number, and you're going to share it this way, and it's not always going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But it was never perfect when we said, is the lead qualified? And, all those little minutiae.
And they would rotate us around, and you'd be like, I don't want to send a lead to him because he's not going to do it, or her because she's not going to sell. So, you track it, but that was like the funny
You don't
money.
want to give it to old Charlie.
That's right. Old Charlie unclosed,
That's funny. Well, it's so interesting. It's funny now looking back, but that's kind of where you got your initial experience.
That's
We
right.
all did that. The initial where you're making cold calls and you're banging out the phone, and it just seems like you're going nowhere, but that's where you're learning.
Oh, it's where we used to, I used to call a lot of fax machines just to make sure they worked. That's an extra dial, a couple 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But we used to record our calls on the old cassette tapes. And that's actually how I got promoted. It was, at the time I was really good friends with one of the other fives. His name was Craig. And to get promoted into inside sales, we had to record our calls for a week. And we basically had to turn in our best tape. And, lucky for me, I ended up winning that competition. So I got out of the hell of dialing for dollars every day in only 3 months.
Yeah.
But my friend Craig, who we're still friends today, it took him an extra 9 before he got out. And we still joke about it today because he's gone on to done really, really well in sales. He's a VP of sales at a large software company. And so we still joke about those early days of call recordings, but I go, I guess you can only be good on a couple days, and my number got called early. But
we used to do those tapes also, and I was the one who listened to them. And first of all, it was really effective.
100%.
As long as you got the buy-in of the reps and said, listen, this is not going to be fun. This is like going through boot camp or something, but you're going to come out the other side. You're going to be better. But this one guy, one of my favorite guys, Greg, he and Maggie were going through training, and they bring me their tapes one day, and they're sitting there, and I'm listening to Greg's tape. And he to me, he goes, yeah. And I hear Maggie's voice. She goes, well, just make a tape for him, Greg. And he goes, why? He goes, because he's trying to help you. And he goes, it's so stupid. And he's playing that tape accidentally right in front of me.
Didn't hit he forgot how to dub.
And I laughed so hard because he's right. I know exactly how he feels, but
You just have to ignore it's there.
Yeah.
And you just flip it and keep going.
it's so stupid. He says it's so stupid.
But hearing yourself on the phone and listening to people's responses as you get, especially early in sales, you realize how bad you really are.
Yeah.
And having that experience and going through that, you really how to handle objections, how to position the product, and really just be a better listener.
Yeah.
Because before you just
we had a 1-page script, and the new people, I said, listen, if you will just read the script, if you'll just read it and go all the way to the bottom, you'll pass the test. And they just can't do it. They have to spew off in one direction or another. I'm like, you don't need to do any of that.
Yeah.
So hard.
Well, a lot of people don't know your name of the company. Like no one knew Blackbaud, no one knew some of the other places we worked at. So you had to tell your story.
Yeah.
But you had to do it crisply and pithily and right in the beginning. And it's hard to get that to come across.
Yeah. Well, so how long were you there?
So Blackbaud, it was a really good run. So did 3 months as account development rep. And then I did inside sales for about 1 year and 3 months. And in that 1 year and 3 months, I had a pretty good territory, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But it was a random territory. It was Rhode Island, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. And, and this goes back to kind of my thought process of early sales is I would practice everything in the beginning on Rhode Island because it's just Rhode Island, smaller nonprofits, smaller clients. I was from Ohio, so I understood the culture there. And so I could, kind of finagle the old Cincinnati boy attitude there, and that worked a little bit. And then DC was like the elite. I wasn't ready to call on those people. So for the first 3 months, I never called DC. I just only took inbound calls from them because I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
And so I practiced on Rhode Island, get better at Ohio. And I ended up beating every single person in the entire company in the first year.
Wow.
Yeah. So we'll tell you what happened next. But I was 24 at the time, maybe 23. And so, you get to go to the big banquet, you get to give a speech in front of even the outside gray hairs. And they didn't know what to do with me. And they couldn't make me an outside rep because I couldn't even rent a car without extra insurance to go drive around. They couldn't make me a manager because nobody would respect me. But then they did have an opening for a reseller in Europe. And so I got to have the opportunity to get promoted quickly to outside sales in Europe for a reseller that they were going to acquire before going public. But we'll get to that next, that experience.
Sure.
But for that year in inside sales, for me, it was, all right, you had I think 300 or 400 clients. You segment them down. What components do they have? What modules do they have? What training have they had last? I started just doing the analytics on the weekend so that when I walked into the office on Monday, I already knew who I was calling and why. And you just kept that cycle going where your funnel just get larger and larger. And they used to call me the mailman because every month, 100% or higher quota. Still have all the old letters that the VPs and bosses would write me. Because it's just the consistency of doing it and having a plan. Walking into the office every morning, 8 a.m., having a plan and executing on it and knowing why you're calling. You're not just calling to say hi or thanks. Sometimes I call and say, hey, I noticed you had a support issue. Maybe I can help you, kind of push it up the queue. But you always had to have a reason. And once you had a reason to call, they started to trust you. And when they trusted you, you could have more of a consulting type call with them where they want to tell you their problems.
Right.
But you wouldn't tell them, okay, great, tell me your problems. I wouldn't just tell the solution right away because I knew what the solution was. You get dangerous after a while. I literally have a chart of all the modules and be like, well, that could solve it, but I'm not going to tell them today. We'll let this keep picking the scab. And eventually they'll tell me how much this is really costing them. And I can get that delta between what it's costing them and what we're going to charge to make it go away.
Right.
And you start building that relationship and the sky's the limit. That really helped me.
And what's an example of what an activity plan would look like for you for the day?
For the activity plan, what I would typically do is on the weekends, right? Because, hey, it's my first job. I want to be successful. I didn't know it was going to be that successful. I would basically look at all their accounts and figure out, okay, geography-wise, where I'm calling, and then what modules they had, and then the type of people I wanted to call and talk to get information from. And then I would just log those notes. And so that I could circle back. Because what I realized is that when you were generating leads for the outside group, that first ADR role, you could generate a lead, but you only had one contact. And you would pass only that one contact over, and that was called a qualified lead. And inside sales is a little bit different. You had to talk to Betty, Susan, Greg, and get all their buy-in. So I would kind of get Susan first one week, and then I'd circle back to Betty the next week and then triangulate around all those three people, different roles. That way I had a story to tell to the CEO or to whoever else needed to talk to. And that for me, because then you could just hammer them with the same value prop every time. Like we all agreed to this. Do you agree as well? Let's figure out when we can get this fixed in the budget cycle. And then you could forecast. Because most people couldn't forecast to save their lives.
Right.
You could forecast accurately when those deals would close. So instead of getting yelled at the end of every month, people would be like, hey, he knows what he's doing. Make your manager look better too.
Absolutely. Well, it's a surefire way to increase your odds of success as a salesperson, whether you're doing inside, outside, international, doesn't matter, is to have a plan. And most people don't. Right, most people just kind of
they wing it, or they wait for the call or the bluebird to land on their shoulder.
The other thing I want to get your take on is we call it the like the bucket theory. Like a salesperson will work, trying to prospect and find until his deal bucket is full, and he's got 4 or 5 good deals in here. And then for the next couple of months, all he's doing is trying to close those deals, right? He's forget about all this activity and prospecting stuff he used to do. It's like, oh, how's that Ohio deal coming, And your manager will do the same thing. How's that big one coming with the Postal Service, Matt, And then all of a sudden they close them, they don't close them, and you're starting over.
Having been on the sales side and the management side, reps do that because they need to have something to say. Like something's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, I learned early on, like I would never tell them those deals were happening. One, because they would swoop on them, especially a bigger name, and you would never hear the end of it because that's the logo they really wanted, or that's the license they really wanted, or the new product. So I would keep those. I wouldn't even put them in the forecasting sheets or anything. I would just leave them out of the opportunity pipeline. Yeah. Because when you do that, you just draw attention to yourself. Yeah. And probably going to be negatively, right? Because it's not real, at least not yet.
We had a bell for a while. And at first it was, you make a sale, ring the bell. Eventually, anytime the bell went off, the executives would come storming down the hall. Who sold something? What happened? How much did we sell it for? What was the margin? What were the terms? It's like the bell got real quiet after a while.
Yep.
We want to answer all those questions.
Under the radar.
Yeah.
My office desk, like people, they still have a picture of it. All I had was the laptop, the phone, a blank legal paper, and one pen. Nothing else in my office. Nice. And people were like, is he leaving? Is he staying? But for me, it was just about organization. Yeah. I would just listen on the phone or on speaker, take my notes. Yeah. And then once I was finished, I'd handwrite all the notes because it's faster that way. Then once the call was done, log it into the system, move on to the next one, and put a reminder in for what I wanted to do next. Yeah. I had a plan for every interaction. Otherwise, you're just dialing to dial.
Yeah. How's it going?
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't work. So we sold a lot of training, right, on the software. I would check their websites to see if they were hiring people. And then when the website would change. Okay, so now I know you hired someone. You're going to try the whole train the trainer stuff, but that never works. Yeah. Send them to Charleston. Let's get them trained up, and you can always put that tickler on the file for them.
Well, that's really cool. So after that, did you go to Europe?
Yeah, I went to Europe.
Okay, tell us about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was a great opportunity at a young age to work for the reseller in Glasgow, Scotland, and it was just myself and two other Americans that went. Andrea, she ran professional services, and Mike ran support, and he also did sales as well. And it was a really great experience because you get a whole other culture. Now, made a lot of mistakes along the way making that decision in terms of, I didn't even interview with the managing director over there, much less could I understand him. It was, you watch The Simpsons, it was like Willie, the lawn care guy, couldn't understand anyone in the office. Yeah. So I knew I couldn't call Scotland, so I started calling Cambridge because it's the posh English accent that we could all understand. Yeah. So I'd make trips down there, and I realized, I'd call it the ugly flight. I'd leave Glasgow, land in London, make as many stops along the way in the morning, visit as many clients as possible, and fly back. We need to move the office. So we eventually moved the office down there to get more trips in. But it was a good experience. It's a different culture. And I realized that when you move into outside sales, especially there were more complicated clients, much larger clients than the U.S. clients. The charities in the UK are way larger than the ones in the U.S., hugely larger. And you start having to rely on other people to sell with you. And that changes the game because it's not just you anymore. You have a sales engineer, you have your manager, you have the managing director sometimes would show up. And what you're trying to do is orchestrate all the chairs and create a nice system that's easy to buy in. And for me, that was kind of hard because that was a huge transition from just being an individual contributor to now having to navigate all these other egos, not just on the other side of the table, but within my own team. Yeah. And the consultants that were also on our side that would deliver consulting services. Because everybody wants what they want, and your job is to kind of navigate and QB that. Different mindset on the enterprise sales level. And I'm glad I learned it, but you start realizing that it's not so much about you, it's about making sure all those other people are happy with the sales cycle and where it's headed. Yeah. And making sure that everyone understands the value proposition we're trying to sell initially. A lot of them always have these grandiose visions of what they want the company to look like in the future. But it's, no, guys, what can we get in the door now, meaning my commission, versus what we can sell them later once they're already a client? Yeah.
Yeah, so
there's competing values.
Yeah, I think it goes from, it's always a puzzle. Whether it's just you and the prospect, that's a simpler puzzle. But when you get to the enterprise selling, and in Europe in particular, it's a more complicated puzzle. And your job is to solve the puzzle.
You're supposed to shepherd people through all this. Yeah. And it's a different skill set to have and a lot harder than I ever imagined it would have been.
Right. So how long were you there?
I was there 3 years, 3.5 years, yeah.
And did you enjoy the London time?
I did. I enjoyed the time I spent in London. It was a great experience, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I learned a lot by being over there.
Yeah.
A lot of great relationships and friends.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things, you've done a lot of international travel since then, but one of the things I suggest that the noobs do as soon as they get a chance is go around the world.
Agreed.
You know, you can do it. I mean, you can do it in 2 weeks if you really want to, but that'd be silly. But 3 months, 6 months, I mean, right when you get out of school, take a year off, you know, you can get one of those flights, those the round the world tickets that cost like $3,000. Just as long as you're going one direction.
That's right. You got to stay the same.
Yeah. And there's a million, and I have it in the book, and I think I've done some videos on it. There's a million ways to do it. I mean, you can get jobs along the way. You can, I don't know, do whatever you want to do. But it's just like, how in the world can we think we're going to be great salespeople selling to companies that, let's just say we're selling to BMW, and we've never been to Germany. We don't understand that they've got operations in Singapore, and, you know, just to see the big picture.
But it helps you, like, what I always said was, you know, one of the first mistakes I always made was I never drank the tea. You know, they'd always offer me tea.
You're like, nah. You got any Sanka?
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't do coffee either. But you realize, like, hey, drink the tea.
Yeah.
That's how the problems get discovered.
Yeah.
And I never had the time for it. But then I realized, and it took some folks to kind of educate me along the way, like, hey, sit down. You're going to have some tea for a while, and you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But what you get out of it is that conversation, the relationship, that normally occurs way faster in the U.S. It takes a little bit more time to get the nuanced trust built over there. And once it's built, I mean, you're good to go.
Yeah.
They'll open up doors for you everywhere.
Yeah.
But drink
the tea.
Drink the tea.
I like that. Drink the tea. So from there, were you back to Blackbaud in the
No,
States?
so
Did you go to Babson then?
no, I went back to Charleston.
Okay.
And went to work for Benefit Focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about Benefit Focus.
So that was I wanted to go to an enterprise software company that had a great track record in growth. And that was them. And I'm very fortunate to have that opportunity. And this was almost like you thought enterprise sales was hard in Europe. This was at a whole other level. We're selling the largest healthcare companies in the world, Aetna, the Blue Cross Blue Shields. And you're bringing an army with you when you go to the sale meeting, including the CEO. And that's where, you know, for love him or hate him, you know, Sean Jenkins taught me a lot, and it was just the OCD-ness of a meeting. I mean, we never went to these places unless we could have the room an hour before our meeting would start. Because you know how most sales meetings, oh, come on in, vendor, sit down, right? And the chairs are shuffled everywhere, and the room looks like garbage. There's trash everywhere, and you're trying to get the projector going. It's like a total disaster. Then I learned so much. Like Sean's like, no, if I'm flying anywhere, sometimes we've private was great. You're going to have that room, and you're going to have an hour to have every chair at the same height, everything perfect. I mean, we're talking like the koozie here, the pen here, the agenda there.
Yeah.
Everything turned on perfectly before anyone walked in the room with us. And it set the tone of like, we're a different type of company. You might not know our name, but if this is the level of professionalism you get in a sales call, much less can you imagine what it's like as a prospect or a customer when you're with us?
Yeah.
And that taught me so much because that was really orchestrating a whole symphony, really, of the CEO, the VPs, you had tons of sales engineers. The product's so big, no one could ever understand it themselves.
Yeah.
You know, you're running is unreal. So that was an incredible experience that I had there. And that was like, I would say, the height of sales for me. And it was fun. I mean,
do they still, they sold? They
IPO'd.
They did?
Yep, another IPO. So this is my second company that I was with that IPO, which was kind of fun.
Nice.
And the learning was incredible. And the people you meet along the way.
Well, that takes you right back to where we started with the setup of the lunch we had the first time.
That's right.
It's just kind of
it can't get out of my system.
It's in your nature now.
Well, you realize how much more people feel relaxed and not rushed. And especially like, here's the menu. It's perfect. Your water's already waiting for you.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So I take that with me everywhere I go now.
Yeah.
You know, anytime I have a meeting, I'm like, I want it an hour or 30 minutes before we get started.
I did a training session for a company for the first time, this company a month or so ago. And I had it was horrible. Horrible. I just said, okay, what time? 3 o'clock. So I show up, I figure how hard can it be? There was like 12 salespeople. So I walk in the room and there's like 6 of them sitting in cubes this way, like 4 of them sitting this way, and then a big screen up here. I'm like, well, where's the training center? And they're like, we're just going to do it here. I'm like, what's the big screen for? Those are for the remote reps. So I'm supposed to train this line and that line and the remote people at the same time.
Yep. And it's just setting those expectations up front.
I should have gone beforehand and said, no, we're not going to do the training today. We have to do it, when it's going to work. But okay, I've learned that. That's good. I'd be more prepared, more like a Boy Scout. Were you a Boy Scout?
I was not a Boy Scout.
Me either. Okay, so you had a good run there, and then Targus?
Yep. So Targus Information Corporation, small company up in D.C. My wife was getting her grad degree, so it made sense to move up there and start a new kind of career. And smaller company, great atmosphere. It was a highly sales/engineering type company. And we basically did data and analytics on consumers and businesses.
Okay.
So the idea was, if you called Domino's on a Friday night, we're the company that gave you the latitude and longitude so they knew where to deliver the pizza and your name and address, as long as it was a consumer-initiated transaction. And so what I liked it because it brought me back to being an individual contributor. We never traveled. You talk about the elephants, the squirrels, and the deer. We would just go after squirrels and deer, and everything could be a transactional thing. So for me, I felt really good about it because I felt like I was making more money and in control of my own destiny, which was great versus what I had before at Benefit Focus, which was the much larger, a lot of ego on both sides of those types of sales. And so for me, it was fun and we're doing well. And then the company kept growing new products. And then we started, what do you think happens? You start transitioning into the larger elephants in the room. So you'd sell like an American Express or a Disney. And now we're back to where I was before again. Right. More complex sales, more listening, right? And that company actually sold. It did really well. It sold to a publicly traded company called New Star Information Systems. So it was a nice exit, and then eventually kind of brought us to Greenville. So, but it was interesting to have that transition of when I first got hired there as an individual contributor outside sales to where I ended up going with these larger clients, more enterprise. They had to build the infrastructure around that as well with the sales engineers and the consultants and everyone else, data analytics, to come in and help assist the sale because it becomes too complex for one person to manage, much less handle.
So did you help them do the bigger deals?
So I helped them kind of do the bigger deals. And, you get a Bank of America, you get a Disney. One of my last clients was Disney. That was, a year and 4 months of getting it to start to finish. But you realize you just have to kind of let the reins go and let the other people around you make you successful. And that's hard to do as an individual contributor. It is so hard because you're like, I don't know about John or Susan. I'd much rather have somebody else come in and, right? Because it mirrors you, it mirrors your personality, and you have to coach them. So I felt like a lot of my times I was just a chauffeur down in Orlando. Get the nice SUV, everybody got a water, everybody got a gum, we're going to go over to Disney. Now, this is what you're going to say. Well, let's get this thing sold.
But you did it. You checked the box for them, and then you transitioned. Was that when you went back to school?
I went to school during that time, yes.
During that time?
Yep, during that time, because you could take a flight from D.C. up to Boston really quick and do like residency weekends. So that's when I got my MBA.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, you had 3 great companies you worked for, and you learned sales from the beginning to the enterprise sales, but you liked the entrepreneurial aspect of it. And you went and got your MBA at the best entrepreneurial school in the country, and probably in the world, is Babson.
That's right.
And I think it has been that way for a long time.
It's been that way. They got some competition now, but looking back on it, it was an incredible experience. And I'm glad I waited a lot longer. Now, I had to wait a lot longer because I have a horrible undergrad GPA. So you had to cure a lot of sins is the way I would describe it. Can't explain away those failures. But wait 10 years, 3 great companies, getting admission to a top school wasn't too difficult.
And what are some takeaways from there that you learned?
From the Babson experience? Well, I think number 1 is your network. And that's why when I came to Greenville, I was like, I have to create one, meet folks like John and others. I sat next to the CFO of Ben & Jerry's. I had the senior vice president of LL Bean. And I joke with my students now, it's like, when you get your MBA, you really want to be the dumbest person in the room. And I for sure was definitely the dumbest person. I was lucky to be there.
Yeah.
And so that network still serves me today up in Boston, in that area of folks that come from there. And I look at it here in Greenville, it's like you really want to absorb all the great information that everybody else has around you. And you got to be humble in that. But once you do, maybe you can pass it on to others or meet more. But for me, that was the most important thing, is to really be able to absorb not only what the professor was saying, but also the folks around me and having those relationships.
That's cool.
And connections.
That's cool. That's great. And so then you and your wife and family moved to Greenville, and you became the person, the person responsible for the entrepreneurial part of the Clemson MBA program.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So I teach in the MBA program.
So you teach in that program, and I've come and sat in some of your classes and talked to your students from time to time. And I can attest that, I hear from students that don't know me and don't know you, but I just somehow meet them. They're like, if you're going to Clemson, you got to go to Dr. Klein's class, because he'll teach you something. So anyway, I'm so glad you're doing that. It's so good for our community.
It's fun. It's very rewarding. I love being around the students. I had the first new cohort today, we were sharing earlier. 24 new students, 24 new ideas. And we got a good track record.
Yeah.
About 30% of them go on to launch the businesses that they came in with.
Yeah.
And that's their livelihood. And to me, that's incredible, because I went to the #1 school in the world at Babson, and I graduated with a PowerPoint deck. What we would try to do at Clemson is graduate revenue. And if you can do that, you can completely change the mindset of these students and hopefully change their stars.
And you sold it to somebody.
You sold it to somebody, and you sold enough of it that you can make a living and support your family.
That's strong.
To me, that's a huge win.
That's so strong.
And pay that tuition back.
Yeah, I think it's easier to make those sales when you're in school.
100%.
Because you can say, I'm just a little old student over here at Clemson trying to sell you, some stuff. But once you get out, you're just another dude on the
Just
street.
another one with a logo that trying to get your name out.
I love that.
Yeah.
You want me to come speak this year?
I would love to have you back.
I would love to.
That's on the calendar.
Love to. Is there anything that you want to pitch to the crew?
Pitch to the crew.
Yeah. Pitch them to come to Clemson, or
Yeah.
anything you're selling these days? And you invested in quite a few companies. Any of those companies, did you buy any of that stuff?
Yeah, I can't touch on my other students, but when they graduate, they sometimes circle back to me, which is great.
Yeah.
But in terms of Clemson, I think what we do best is, one, we care. We care about not only who you are and what you are, but what you can become. And I think every professor, every staff member truly has your best intentions in mind. That we're going to network you everywhere in Greenville. Greenville's great for it. Clemson's great for it. The network, the connections. If I send an intro, you're going to respond probably same day. Same with a lot of other people I know in Greenville. And you might not have the answer for them, but you might point them in the next direction. In other cities, you might get shut down right away, or in other environments or in other universities. But for some reason here, I don't know what it is, people want to help each other. And they want to help you succeed, and they can be a part of that. And that's what I love to share with my students is, I might not have the answer, but I know two people that are in a tangential industry that we can get you connections with. Yeah. And as long as you have the ability and attitude, you're going to get the answers you need to be successful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Last question. What's your favorite word?
Favorite word, tenacity.
Tenacity.
Because you can't teach it.
Yeah.
I told my students this today. It's like, we can put everything in front of you, but I can't make you do it.
Yeah.
Only you can want it. And that's the hardest. I wish I could do an academic paper on it, because, we can go through all the motions. We can go through all the sales training. We can do everything we can, but I can't teach you to just do it every day and be good about it and just own it.
Yeah. Good word. Excellent word. Well, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate you being my friend, and I'm glad you're in Greenville and doing what you're doing, and hope you come back to the podcast one day.
Anytime. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.